Alternatively, we could all go home.
That is an option.
If there's no questions, we will go home.
I'm going to grab a cookie while you're thinking.
So you talked about the marriage covenant being sovereignly administered. What about couples who aren't married by a pastor, by somebody who is ordained on ordainme.com or whatever? Like, how does that affect the marriage? Is God still ordaining that marriage?
That's a good question.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Right? This is a thing that God has made, and they are subscribing to it, right? And it is before God, even if it is not before one of his representatives. So, not totally dissimilar to going to a courthouse, right? The courthouse, the judge is not ordained, right? He's a witness. So, it's before God. Ideally, it's before witnesses. In good order, it's before a representative of God, an ordained minister, right? That is most regular, most appropriate, but not fundamentally necessary. Yeah.
Ephesians 5:26 talks about Jesus sanctifying and cleansing the church, and Paul is making a comparison, or like how men should be treating their wives. My understanding is that Jesus is to do all the sanctifying and cleansing. So are men supposed to be doing that to their wives, or am I missing something?
Good question. Tyler will answer.
Yeah, men should definitely be doing that to their wives. Where's your Bible? You didn't bring your own? I left it.
Okay.
So the entire passage there is calling men to be like Christ to their brides. Right, that's the entire purpose. Get there really quick. This is not my Bible. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. And then right after that it says, in the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. So Christ does do this to us through the church, through a number of other means, but as Christ's representative in our homes, and as we're mirroring him, right, we're the example in our home of Christ, we are called to daily, like Josh said, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow, be sanctifying our wife as a means of God, right? We're a means that God is using in our home. And so as we're washing our wife with the word and washing our families with the word, there is a routine washing, right? I'm sure most of you shower probably at least once a week, probably more. That routine washing is normal, but there are times when you've been remodeling and you might wash with more intention, right? Or you've been outside working in the muck and you've got mud all down the front of your shins. So while you're showering, you apply specific intention there, right? So this is like when we see some serpent that might have slithered into the house. We still have the routine washing, but now we have more intention, right? It's like, okay, I need to talk about this specific issue and bring God's word to bear on it as his representative.
Following up, you're asking, wait a second, who saves, right? Isn't Jesus the one who saves? So how is it that does the husband save too, right? So it's important to understand that this is a metaphor, that this is a picture. But how is it that God sanctifies? How is it that God sanctifies? He sanctifies by means. He sanctifies by the preached word, right? Coming out, and then we receive it and go, ooh, you're right. He sanctifies by one another, saying, hey, you're in sin. Stop, right? He sanctifies by means. And I think the husband is one of those means for the wife. Yeah, go ahead.
I also think he primarily sanctifies with me and God, my relationship with him. So, or maybe not primarily, but it seems to all happen together, right? But that seems like a big part of it.
Well, yeah, but who is your head?
God.
Who is your wife's head?
Sorry, Jesus.
Who is your wife's head?
Ultimately, Jesus, but
Directly.
the husband.
The husband. So who's responsible? Who is Christ's representative that he uses as a primary means?
The husband.
The husband.
Fair enough. Others.
I'm
So a contract is between me and another person, right? So what's your name? Do you have a name? Yeah, you.
Tipton.
Tipton?
Tipton.
So Tipton and I could agree on something. We could agree to mow each other's lawns, right? Tipton could agree to lend me his weed whacker, and I could agree to lend him my rake, right? And we have this contract between us. And I need to fulfill my obligations to Tipton and Tipton to me. However, at any point, Tipton could say, dude, I've got my own weed whacker now. And I can say, well, that's fine, I didn't want you to borrow it anymore anyways. And we can break this off, right? And I know, and we can sever it. Okay, so a covenant is not between me and Tipton. I do not honor a covenant because it's me and Tipton. I honor it because it's God, right? So a marriage covenant is not simply something my wife and I have agreed to, but I understand my duties to her as duties to God, right? And so as far as real life examples in specific, in some ways that's tricky because it's sort of all pervasive.
Everything.
Right? I understand all that I am in relation not just to her, but to God, right? And I fulfill my duties to her because that is duties to God. And it's part of my worship, right? My worship of God is served out in my serving of my wife. There you go. Thank you. Yeah. Tyler, I'm sure, has something more to say.
I was thinking the same thing. I was just going to start listing everything I do.
But that would have gotten tedious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of applying the covenant love to marriage and like Jerry's question about, like I guess if you're not ordained by the pastor and that kind of thing, what is covenant? Is it a covenant marriage for like non-believers if there's no acknowledgement of God?
Yes. Yeah. It's part of creation.
To piggyback off of that, so is marriage ordained by God if the people who are getting married are not believers, but then become new to the faith after their marriage? Like, what does that look like?
If they come to Christ after being married,
Yes.
Like
they were married before, and they are still married.
Yeah.
Yeah, but is it still like, is it ordained by God when they haven't come to Christ yet?
It is. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
So what does it look like to bear the responsibility of your wife's sin on a day-to-day basis, and then also before God? Like you come before God at the end of your life, and I'm like trying to picture it, like I'm sitting there with my family, and he calls me, and then he's like, what up? Like, what happened?
What gives?
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's two parts of that. What does it look like on a daily basis, and then also like before God when you meet him,
Yeah.
when you die?
So we'll take the second part first because I think it's maybe easier. It is, as husband, as father, as head of the household, it is my responsibility, right? Maybe it's better before that to distinguish between guilt and responsibility. A great example that's given is imagine that there's a ship. Ship's being steered by the helmsman, and let's say that the helmsman makes an error and runs the ship aground. Right? Who's guilty? The helmsman. It was his fault. He was getting out of the Navy in 2 weeks anyways. What does it matter? Right? But the captain's career is ruined. Right? Why? Because he was responsible for the whole thing. Right? He bore no guilt, but he's now done. Right? So he bore responsibility. So as at the end of all things, when I stand before God, I stand before God responsible for the holiness of my household, right? Responsible for their sanctification, right? Which is a huge and weighty thing.
This goes back to your question.
Yeah, right, all right. So did I use the means at my disposal to call out sin, to not only to call out sin, but to preach righteousness, right? To show them the standard of God.
And help them love that standard.
Right. And not simply seek to conform for the sake of conformity.
Yeah, not
but
hard-hitting.
to love God, right?
To see the glory in it.
Yeah, yeah. So their holiness is my responsibility. So under the list of things that I stand before God for, yes, all of their holiness is on me. Is it also on them? Do they still bear guilt? Yes. Yes.
Yes.
So day to day, all the things that we've been saying, it's preaching the word. It's loving the word yourself. Right? That's important. It is calling out attitudes in your children. It's calling out attitudes in your wife. It's praising virtues in your children and praising virtues in your wife. Doing all the gardening necessary to preserve their holiness.
And practically, too, it's understanding the responsibilities she has and is taking into account, right? Like, Scripture talks about how a husband is able to nullify a wife's commitment if they haven't discussed it, right? So I have that authority because I am her head. Another maybe helpful metaphor is, like, let's say my son Sawyer was down here and he decided it was a great idea to play baseball in the gym and chucked a ball through that window. Who is going to pay for the window? Him or me? I am, because I'm his covenant head. I'm responsible. I will pay for it because I lead him. He's mine. Well, he's the one that's guilty, right? Similar metaphor to what Josh was talking about. But I'm going to come in and take the burden of that off of him. Teach and train and equip, but I'm covering the cost.
So let's, well, I have a couple questions. Maybe one of them is, I'm trying to tease out exactly the line where a marriage becomes a covenant administration that is between two people and God. So non-believers are within that kind of covenant. Somebody who's married by their friend who did the 30-minute online quiz is within that covenant. What do you do with like common law marriages where they never went through a ceremony, but they've been living together this long, and so they got promise rings on. Maybe they've been boyfriend, girlfriend, and living together for 10 years, and they have 5 kids, and they, in their mind, they're married, but they don't care about the paperwork. They don't want to go through where exactly is the line in that kind of marriage? Because that affects how maybe we have friends who are that way, or family members who are that way. That affects how we relate to them.
That's a good question. I've never thought about it. That's not true. I have thought about it. But as far as like drawing specific lines, like 7 years, bam, there you go, right? 7 years from what? So I concede that's an intensely messy situation. Try to convince them to get married.
Yeah, part of it is I would ask questions around reasons why not, right? Part of it is there active rebellion here? Like, are they rebelling against the principle of marriage itself? Or the state's authority? Or something, like why? What's the reason? Those are the kind of questions I would go down, the pathways.
Yeah.
Could you go a little more in depth into the women's role of filling or adorning, that kind of stuff? I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Um,
Like broader look at that.
Broader look. Can you be at all more specific?
I don't know, more examples than maybe like decorating a house.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that you could broaden it. I agree that it is more than simply decorating a house, but I don't want to cheapen just decorating a house, right? It is taking a space that has been defined, right, and making it a place of life, a place for life, and that's difficult to define, especially for me, who doesn't understand how it works, right? But I do walk into the space and I go, wow, this is lovely. I don't know why, but it is, right? And I think that it is easy to downplay and to tragically downplay the importance of beauty, the importance of music, the importance of food, the importance of warmth. Fellowship.
That's what it is.
Yeah, right.
It's fellowship.
Mm-hmm. That's good. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a really practical example. When we brought Sammy in, our foster son that we currently have, right, 6th little boy in the house, we functionally had twins. And so for a period of time, we were less hospitable because we were being more intentionally hospitable to this little child. And as primarily Nicole, because she bears the brunt of that hospitality and that love and care, right, as she's filling a space, as Nicole got used to that and adjusted to that, then she was able to open our home up more. So I really think the aspect of hospitality, inviting people in, breaking bread with them, a big burden there falls on our spouses, on our wives, right? And in my house, right, I invite and Nicole hosts. That really is the way it is. I am not a good host, generally speaking. I have some good friends that have helped us become better hosts, helped me become a better host. But fellowship is something that I think women especially bring into the picture.
Going off of that, how have you seen your wives be life-bringing in spaces outside of your homes?
One of the things that they do in our church that is absolutely phenomenal is we have lots of baby showers and we have lots of bridal showers, and they are open to the entire church. It's not an invite-only sort of thing. It's literally posted in the church bulletin, sent out in the church email, show up. And so everyone goes, especially new people that are attending. I don't go either. Yeah. All the ladies go, I think. I've never been to one, so I don't know. But I think that's something.
Your church is like a couple dozen people?
Yeah, we have a few. Yeah.
Thought it was more. Yeah,
A
sorry.
few more. Yeah, I think we're probably, I don't know how much.
1,800.
Well, that's across multiple services and sites. But in Moscow specifically, 1,800 people. I think our church has around, or our specific uptown has 800-ish. But yeah, the new women are easily able to come, to meet, to grow, to learn, build relationships, do those sorts of things.
Also, bringing meals when children are born, and not just when children are born, but also when so-and-so's in the hospital, or when
Foster
there's
babies.
illness or foster babies, right? That's really, really practical. Again, it's just food.
Yeah, I've had probably over 2 months of meals brought to my house that I didn't have to cook. And it's like, side note, it is delicious food. Like, absolutely delicious food. Homemade sourdough bread, like, oh my goodness, it's amazing. So, like, yeah, 2 weeks after big events, it's super common in our community where we don't have to cook, someone just shows up and drops food off. It's really regular.
Assisting with childcare as well, helping one another, or for the women who don't have children, assisting with the ones who do. My wife could tell you more.
Hosting events.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll have to follow up with what he's asking. Like, so as we've been going through the manhood and women's series in our church, Preston has talked through like the family, the church, and then the culture. Like, I know you guys are talking about home, but can you expand like even more so like in the culture? How have you seen your wives bring life to the culture around you?
Could you maybe repeat the question?
So she's following up on the same question. So how, with the understanding that the order goes family, church, culture broadly, how does that work? What does it look like for a woman, or for our wives particularly, to be bringing life and filling and adorning in the culture?
I think the biggest thing here, so I appreciate your question. I think Josh can have some maybe specific short-term ways, but the way that our wives are immediately affecting culture is through our children, right? Like, we have to have a generational view of life, of the world, of where we're at. That's the way that God looks at things, right? He has a story arc that is weaving its way through time, and all of our children are going to go out into culture and affect them. So her work in the home right now is developing children, arrows, weapons to be sent out and to go do many, many more things in our culture. That was the first thing that popped into my head. I think that was worth mentioning.
Yeah. And what's interesting is what are men and women required to do? They're told to do in the Great Commission, to be fruitful. Right? Okay. To be fruitful. And then earlier, it talks about the trees bringing forth fruit according to their kind. I think that's helpful to put those two together. So you are called to bring forth fruit according to your kind, according to your station, according to your situation, right? And so in some ways, it's a difficult question to answer because every station is different. And so I can give you examples from my wife, but it is, you heard the ages of my children. My dear and lovely and hardworking wife does not leave the house very much, right?
Same.
It is a very intense work for her right now in caring for the children. And so as far as broader examples, I hope that in the future I will be able to answer that question better. But as of now, I can say, one, bring forth fruit according to your kind, according to your station. Right? What is right and fitting for me to do at this time? And in my situation, it's mostly small people.
Yeah. So I think my wife does as well. When we get asked the types of questions that I was mentioning, we get asked when we're out and about, when she's out and about, right, at Costco or at Walmart or Winco, those sorts of things.
Also, I never get asked those questions, ever.
My wife does a lot.
Anyways, keep waiting.
Just the ability to respond in joy and to point to what she's doing. And then secondarily, I think just by being a godly woman, right? Like, you look at the trajectory of our culture and it really is shoving against godly women. It's shoving, like, feminism is atrocious, right? It is not, it is a serpent that has slithered in and has grown to full size. And so our wives, standing regal as our queens and leading, helping lead our homes with us, right? Our kind of internal affairs, modestly, appropriately raising up children, that does phenomenal wonders without words.
Yeah, that's really good.
There's one more.
Okay, I just have a really hard time picturing what this looks like with someone, with a wife who works full
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
So what do y'all have, like, are y'all advocating for it to, like, if the wife doesn't have to work, like, that should be your ultimate goal for the wife to just be at home with kids, or like, I guess the better option of the two, or I just don't know, I don't see how this, what everything that y'all are saying is, like, how does that work really well
Right.
whenever both parents are working full time?
Right, that's a good question. I think that you don't see in Scripture a prohibition of women working outside the home. I don't think that the Proverbs 31 clearly describes a woman who is involved in commerce, right? She sees a field, she buys it, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think that it is at all wrong for a woman to work outside the home. Now, are there ways that can be done better and worse? Yes, I think so. Right? Are there callings that are more suitable to a woman and callings that are less suitable to a woman? I think that's fairly self-evident, right? And if there are children, right, then you do have pertinent questions, like, well, who is going to be caring for the children, right? If it is not the wife, if it is not the mother, anyone else is going to be less suited for the task. So,
Because they're not their kind, is what you're saying.
right. And so, again, I'm not going to lay down a thus saith the Lord, but I think it is worth considering, well, if not the mother, then who? And is it fitting for the woman to give the care of her children to someone else so that she can pursue some other calling? Perhaps.
Yeah, I think
Probably not. But
some helpful context too is, like, what is this other calling and how temporal is it, right? Again, our children are eternal beings, incredibly formable in those formative years. And so kind of keeping that perspective and understanding our roles, right? Men are to go out and women are to come behind and help support those sorts of things is really crucial. Also, I think the Proverbs 31 woman, reading the text, she has children and she has a husband, but I think it would be maybe a safe assumption to say those children seem to be more raised the more older.
yeah,
So
and I think
there's
it's reasonable.
stages when staying at home makes more sense, and I think is again, not binding the conscience, but likely a better path to go. And then as you grow out of those in the trenches years, when it just takes a lot of time and effort, then opening up into new possibilities and opportunities. And we're already toe dipping that direction, specifically in our house, right? Where my wife is supporting the private Christian school our kids go to by doing their event planning, which she's able to do from home and still care for our children. It's not taking her away from her kids, it's rather on top of. I think that's a good way to look at it, right? You have these primary responsibilities and obligations, and one of the things God does with us over time is he grows our capacity. Right? We should be growing and being stretched, and oftentimes that isn't fun, but what we see happening is the ability to take new things on. And so he does that through more children, and at some point he does that through giving you other things you can do on top of being a mother.
Thank you guys so much. It's hard to cut off a good Q&A. I'm gonna have to do it a lot. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Give them a hand again.